All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. Thank you for joining my LinkedIn Live today. My name is Scott Calvé. I'm the Director of Technical Marketing and Competitive Intelligence for VMware SASE. Today, I'm going to talk to you about bridging the SASE knowledge gap, and we're going to debunk some popular myths and misconceptions and have a lot of fun. So, just a little bit about me. My name, like I said, my name is Scott Calvé. I have 25 years experience in the IT industry. 13 of those years were as a customer. You can see my scar tissue here um, from my days doing that. But then I spent my last 12 years almost here at VMware. And during this time, or at least my background, I've been an IT director, architect, administrator, been in marketing, sales, product management, and I have a lot of experience across a number of different technologies and disciplines. So my main ask though of you today, please ask questions. I can't see those while I'm presenting, but some folks who are helping me out with the call are going to relay those to me. So I hope I can answer those. If not, I'll get back to you. The other ask I have of everyone is if you haven't connected with me yet, or followed me on LinkedIn, please scan that QR code or go to that link. I'm very active on the platform and I would love to hear from you. So just a quick summary of the agenda today. We're going to have some fun. Like I said, we're going to run through these common myths and misconceptions about SASE. We're going to go beyond that. I'm going to give you a balanced perspective, real world, right? And then, I'm going to talk to you about how VMware differentiates with our SASE solution. But let's get started. So, what is a myth? Well, I think we all know myths are, that typical story that was told. Typically, you think about Greek mythology, and there's other myths. But today, I want to talk about the other definition of a myth, which is myths can often be widely held but false beliefs or ideas, right? And that happens with not just stories and supernatural things, but it also happens with technology and because of different marketing campaigns and things like that. Myths and misconceptions are formed, right? So how are those things formed? Well, they're formed due to limited information. There's something called confirmation bias, where you only interpret new data through your own filter, your own lens, and existing beliefs. Sometimes there's cultural influences, cognitive shortcuts, overgeneralizations, and just people don't think through things. So, and a lot of times over marketing of certain terms can be a purveyor of that. And this is also a human tendency, right? We want to explain complex phenomena through these imaginative narratives, right? And that works just the same way with technology. And we hear something, especially something like SASE, which rolls off the tongue very easily, and the original meaning often gets lost, and a lot of misconceptions arise through poor marketing and things like that. So let's jump into some of the general myths and misconceptions out there. Well, SASE, and I was kind of alluding to this before. SASE is well understood. That's a myth, right? So I would say SASE is not well understood. And while people like to say the acronym, right, and it stands for Secure Access Service Edge, I'll explain more of that in a second, but they don't always understand what it means. In fact, it's been my personal experience that most people don't understand what it means. But you can find a ton of videos of people explaining it. At the end of the day, all you need to understand is that SASE delivers both optimized and secured outcomes for remote users, for branch sites, for any kind of traffic on the WAN, right? And this is important because it's one thing to, when you want to secure your traffic, often what happens is performance is compromised. So if you want to optimize that, this is really where SASE comes in. And that's the simplest way to explain it. And hopefully you remember that. But SASE, like so many terms, start off well-meaning. This term was coined by Gartner. There's a paper you can go check out called The Future of Networking in the Cloud, written by Gartner like 3 years ago, which will help you understand where this all came from. But SASE, even as a term, is evolving. But because it's been over marketed, like you can think of other terms like cloud SD, which is software defined, or digital transformation. These get applied to anything, and the original meaning can get lost. Um, and I will define that in a second. But here's another myth. Sometimes people think of SASE as a new technology, and SASE is not a technology at all. It's actually an architectural framework. So this is really important, right? And it's really a conglomeration of existing products and technologies. And each one of these products and technologies has its own well-established market, right? And they've been used, they have user communities, all sorts of stuff surrounding it. So another myth, right, is sometimes people will say that there's another acronym that has been thrown into SASE, and I'll explain this in the next slide. But there's these two terms. So people say SASE, and then there's this three-letter acronym, which is SSE. So sometimes people say, oh, well, SSE and SASE are interchangeable. You'll even hear them people use them interchangeably as they discuss SASE, right? They're not the same thing. In fact, SSE is a part of SASE, which I'll show you. They do get conflated. And remember, the acronyms stand for similar things, which I understand why they get confused. You can see the acronyms right there, but they are very different. In fact, here's the difference. The Gartner definition really is SASE equals SD-WAN plus SSE, that other acronym. So you might be wondering, well, then what is SSE? I maybe know what SD-WAN is. Maybe you don't. So I'll explain that really quick. So SD-WAN represents the access portion of that secure access service edge acronym, right? The access being the connectivity part. Within that access piece, or that SD-WAN, right, you have WAN optimization, you have routing, quality of service, all these other technologies and features are kind of rolled up into that, but SD-WAN represents that access portion. The other side of that coin is SSE. That's your security service edge. This encompasses your these four really core security technologies, which are SWG, CASB, ZTNA, and firewall as a service. Okay. So this is very important to understand. VMware has performed very well in this space. We're number one in SD-WAN. We differentiate with our cloud gateways over other SD-WAN vendors. We also have something called DMPO, or dynamic multipath optimization, where we do per packet steering. Very cool stuff, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But some of the other myths you hear is, oh, well, I can't adopt SASE. It's only for large enterprises. Well, that's a myth too. So businesses and organizations of all sizes can benefit from the improved security outcomes you get and the simplified management you get through a SASE architectural framework and implementation. And to contrast that myth, a lot of times commercial and small medium businesses are the ones who can implement SASE the fastest. So that's a good thing to know. Another fun myth, or I should say, it's another thing I've heard is, well, SASE is not suitable for regulated industries. So think about government, retailers with PCI, that kind of stuff. Well, they need to, SASE providers do understand those unique needs for those industries. They've gone through the various levels of certifications. It's not always the same for each SASE solution from each vendor. But it's important to understand that, yes, SASE can be implemented for those industries. It's not a limitation. Some people say, well, SASE is a security risk. Might not be one of the most common myths you've heard. I've heard it pop up once or twice. But the argument tends to center around, well, if I consolidate all my services, my security services into a single platform, which you don't always have to do, but sometimes they think that, then I'm going to increase my risk. Well, all these SASE providers have advanced security measures, including us, and redundancy to mitigate that risk. And really, if you think about it, one of the biggest problems, a lot of times there's a misconception around just, oh, if I buy all the best security software and I have the best security services, everything's just inherently secure. One of the major problems and the reason people get hacked is because their security implementations just get too complex. They're not as consolidated. And what you have is this leads to configuration drift. Things don't get updated, especially when you're talking about thousands of firewalls sitting at lots of branches or even hundreds, depending on the size of the implementation. If you don't update these things and there was a problem with the code, for example, then you're going to be at risk. And if you're not updating these and dealing with them in a controlled, centralized, easy to manage format, you're going to run into problems. You could be subject to various security risks. So this is very important to keep in mind, that complexity is the enemy of good security, right? Just as much as having the worst software or whatever. So another thing I've heard is, well, I can't get SASE. Again, it's a marketing term and it's also too expensive. Well, poor performance and network experience for your users, that's expensive. They're also not going to be very happy, but they need to be able to do their jobs. You need to secure the traffic to protect your business and your IP, but you need to be able to do that in a way that users can have that optimal experience. Everything is quick. They can do their jobs efficiently, right? So that's expensive. Security breaches in themselves are extremely expensive, not to mention all the bad press that surrounds it could be very detrimental to your brand. So these are two very important things that you have to accomplish simultaneously. So over the long term, though, as these services consolidate, this can lead to potential savings from a total cost of ownership standpoint. So this is something you need to keep in mind. And SASE can help you reduce the amount of standalone products you have, even though you don't have to necessarily reduce down to one single vendor. And then I mentioned this before. A lot of people like to say, well, SASE is just this marketing term. There's no real business value behind it. You're just trying to repackage existing products and sell them to me. Well, SASE does have tremendous value to the business. I agree that, again, because that acronym, it has, it's kind of a funny play. It rolls off the tongue, that people just like to say that a lot. And what I always recommend to folks who are learning about it is, don't get lost in the acronym. That is, it has been over marketed. Think about the true business value. What are those business outcomes that SASE delivers? So I want to lay out 6 for you here. And I'm not going to read through all these, but this is something you can hopefully watch again and get and look at these. SASE helps you reduce total cost of ownership across your business organization. It will help you support a more distributed architecture. It can transform both your infrastructure from networking and security standpoint. And then we're going to help you accelerate app modernization, right? As more apps move to the cloud and you need to steer that traffic efficiently. This is important. And then overall, at the end of the day, SASE can enable new digital business scenarios. So this is very important to keep in mind. I hope you come back and you look at these, because this is really what you need to think about when you hear that term SASE, are those business outcomes. Now, let's get into, I should say last but not least, another myth I've heard is technologists don't really care about SASE. Again, getting back to that marketing term. So SASE does require a strategic vision and executive buy-in, right, to fund it, right? And a lot of times, though, a lot of organizations have already implemented some of these technologies. Maybe they haven't stitched them together. So that might not even be a hurdle, but you need to have that strategic vision. It needs to get buy-in. But like I've said, there's nothing new in SASE. There's no new technology, and I'll keep hitting on this. So what I've noticed, though, is, and this is true of any technology adoption in my 20 plus years of experience, there's oftentimes these core technologies, and I'm planning on writing a blog about this, is that from the technologist standpoint, down at the bottom level, you have those administrators, engineers, architects. They just think about the technologies. They're trying to solve very specific problems, right? So they'll adopt those technologies, but they don't necessarily think about it in that strategic architectural framework and how it delivers the value to the business. That's where SASE comes in. That's why it seems to be more interesting and appealing to the C-suite. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the same things. It's just the different parties, right? One's more technical, one's more business. They're thinking about them in two different ways. So it's important to understand that. Now, let's jump into some of the technical myths that surround SASE. So here's myth number 1. SASE is a replacement for your current network infrastructure. that it's not intended to replace your network infrastructure at all. It's really an overlay or can augment it. If you don't have SD-WAN today, then maybe you would be replacing some branch routers, something like that. Maybe it involves some adjustment to your firewalls, but overall, your core networking technology, especially on the LAN side, is not going to change. It really augments it, helps improve that, and can streamline the management of that. So here's another myth. So SASE will eliminate the need for security teams. This is a less common myth. I have heard it come up. That's just not true, right? Obviously, security is core to the whole SASE message and story. You need someone to understand the business and know how to draw up, create those policies, and then implement them. So the security teams, SASE will become core part of their jobs. And like I said, a lot of times it already is, because they're implementing these different technologies like SWG, CASB, and ZTNA VPN solutions. Another myth I've heard is, well, SASE, because it's routing everything to a POP, lacks scalability. That's not true. So a lot of these vendors, we support, multiple gigs per second in our POPs. So the performance is there, and there's a misconception a lot of times that you're using more bandwidth than you actually are. So SASE can scale. And again, because what it's about is taking those security technologies, making them cloud native, moving them to the cloud, right? That the whole point of cloud native is to enable that scale. So this is extremely important, right? That's why we go to cloud, and this is the whole point behind SASE. So that myth is never more untrue. So what about SASE can't support high speed? So I kind of got into that. SASE POPs can deliver those high speeds with SD-WAN. It helps ensure minimal latency, and this is what helps maintain productivity and give the users a great experience. So what about, here's this other myth. So, I'm worried if I go implement these SASE technologies, it's just going to be too disruptive. It's not, right? It's not. You, in many ways, if you know what you're doing, you can implement this, switch over without the users ever knowing. Moving to a SWG versus a firewall that resides in the data center where you're hairpinning all the traffic. This can be done without anybody noticing, right? And SD-WAN, okay, this is where SD-WAN comes in, right? Which I mentioned to you was that access portion of SASE. This is where it can also play a big role, because we can intelligently steal around that traffic, and it makes that implementation of those security services more seamless. So what's another myth? Well, all SASE components must be deployed at the same time. This is not true either. And in fact, like I said, a lot of organizations are using various components of the SASE architectural framework. So they might be using one or two. So that just proves the point right there, right? They don't have all five. And remember, those five, it's not just those core five, but there are some other technologies, which I'll talk about. But SASE overall is a journey. And like I said, you don't have to implement all the services at once. And then SD-WAN is a key part of operationalizing that, as I mentioned before. So a lot of times that can be a great place to start if you haven't implemented some of those other ones. So this gets into the next myth. Perfect segue. SD-WAN is the least important component of SASE. Some vendors might say that. This could never, this is completely untrue. Like I said, it's a foundational component. A lot of times it's the starting point. It's the way you operationalize the rest of those security components. And Gartner talks a lot about this. So I highly recommend check out some of the stuff they've wrote, others have wrote. It really will dive into the technical details of why SD-WAN is such a foundational part of it, right? But that it's important to understand it is that key step in operationalizing the whole thing. Some folks might say, well, you don't need zero trust with SASE. Well, that's kind of ridiculous, because we said, well, ZTNA, zero trust network architecture, that's what that acronym stands for. That's talking about the VPN replacement of sort. That's zero trust is core to SASE. And zero trust isn't just ZTNA that often gets conflated with the whole remote access argument or technology. But zero trust is really a mindset, right? It's a methodology. It's about, hey, before we would just give someone VPN access from their home computers. We have no idea what people are downloading there, what they're doing there, if it's been compromised, but we're still, we're just granting them full access to the network over that VPN. Zero trust says, no, I'm not going to just trust things automatically. In fact, I'm not going to trust you. And any access you want to applications, you're going to have to whitelist, or you're going to have to trust it explicitly. This has been a problem for a lot of organizations to adopt. They struggle with this, right? Because a lot of times they don't quite understand how all the applications are mapped, which users are using what, and you need to build that map. You need to understand that context to truly implement zero trust in an effective way. So that's important to keep in mind, but it is foundational to SASE. So here's another myth. Some might say, well, I have firewall as a service, right? I'm leveraging something like that. So SWG, which is Secure Web Gateway, this is usually people think of it as URL filtering. This is unnecessary in a SASE model, is what they'll tell you. This is a myth. It's an essential component. It's one of those 5 key components of SASE that I mentioned, in addition to firewall as a service. Is there overlap? Yes, and SWG definitely focuses more on protecting against threats from internet-bound traffic, but there's a lot of overlap. So credit to somebody on my team that I work with, Mike Pfeiffer, who created this slide. But I wanted to throw it out there. This is obviously some might disagree with some of it, but I thought it was this is a great layout. And it's just, he created this Venn diagram, and you can see firewall as a service on the right, SWG and CASB on the left, and then in the middle there, you can see where the overlap is. But they're both essential if you want to capture all those fringe security technologies and features. Okay, it's very important to understand. On-premises firewall solutions are better than SASE. So some might argue, look, I don't need SASE. I don't need to put my security services in the cloud. Why? Oh, because I have this giant firewall that's sitting inside my data center. In fact, maybe I have a couple of them for all my data centers, right? The problem with that is you're hairpinning. And this is a huge performance impact for your users. You shouldn't, if all they need to do is access their application in the cloud, let's say Office 365, right? Do you want to send them back through your data center and then out again just to get to something when a data center that might be sitting close to them in the city that they live near? It doesn't make sense, right? Now, granted, you could just let them break out and go to that directly, but then you might lose some of the control you'd want with like a cloud access security broker, right? Denying the download of files or something like that, right? So this is important. You need again, we want to give that security to our users, but we don't want to compromise their performance. If you're just thinking about that firewall in your data center, you think that's good enough. It's not good enough. You need to have the firewall in the cloud. This way it scales horizontally. Your traffic will take the most optimized path to wherever the application lives, but you're also able to apply that security globally, regardless of where that user is, and you're simultaneously optimizing their traffic. Extremely important. This is also important from an update perspective because you can keep everything updated globally, right? Very important. Another myth, SASE eliminates the need for a branch firewall. So some might argue, hey, guess what? Get rid of your branch firewalls. You don't really need that branch firewall anymore. You're doing it all in the cloud, right? Well, I'm going to partially bust this one. So SASE can eliminate the need for a branch firewall. It absolutely can, but this is conditional. So you must route 100% of your traffic up into the POP from that branch in order for that to be true. If you're trying to protect with east-west or internet breakout, it's not going to work. So you can look at this slide. If 100% of your branch traffic flows go through SASE, like I said, okay, then yes, we can replace that. But this can be problematic. Doing that can be problematic depending on the vertical you're in. It's healthcare, government. There might be rules, stipulations preventing you from doing that. So you might need to do security on-prem. Like I said, you want to do that, the VLAN to VLAN security, the east-west, or maybe you have a lot of bypass rules, then it's just not going to be feasible. You probably will still need that edge firewall. And this is important to understand. So last, let me jump into this section here where we want to go over some of the vendor related myths, and then what's the VMware difference. I work for VMware. I'm part of the technical marketing team, so obviously I have something to say about that. So here's the vendor myth number one. So SASE will eliminate vendor choice. Sometimes people think, oh my gosh, I'm going to go SASE because they think of it as one product, one technology, which it's not. um, they're going to think that I have to go and I'm going to get locked in with one vendor, right? That's not true. So there's a number of different ways to consume SASE. You can get it all from one vendor. I'm not saying that you can't. We obviously do that, which I'll talk about. But you're not locked in. You don't have to be locked in. There is advantages to using a single vendor solution, but that's not the case. So that gives me into this next one, similar myth. So I've heard all SASE components must be consumed from a single vendor. So I just debunked that. That's not the case. You can use different SASE technologies from different vendors, right? And like I said, these are designed for scalability. So you want it's about connecting up to those and then using them. So really quick then, what are the multiple ways then to consume SASE? And how does that help me with vendor choice? So there's a single vendor converged model, I like to call it, where you can get all these various core SASE technologies. You can consume them from a single vendor. The pros of that, it's operationally simple. You have a lower cost of ownership because it's operationally simple, right? OpEx costs will go down with the simplicity. You can get full bandwidth utilization if the services are in line and they exist in the same POP. So this is important. This is not always true with every vendor. Sometimes even vendors have their different services distributed around different POPs. So you add in additional hops. But there's better long-term potential when you go with a single vendor, especially as SASE evolves and you start to bring in things like edge compute, where you're starting to, as you're distributing application, you have these applications that you built in the cloud, you made them cloud native, but in order to improve performance, you want to distribute those applications, push them closer to the edge where people are consuming them, maybe even send some of the data down there. This is where SASE, I believe, is going to incorporate that, or we believe that is VMware. And that's one of our key advantages. The con to this way of consuming SASE is not every component will be best of breed. And this gets back to debunking those last two myths I just talked about. So you can consume SASE from multiple vendors, and there's even this dual vendor integrated model. Again, we call it integrated. So you could say, hey, I want the best SD-WAN solution on the market. I'm going to go with VMware SD-WAN, and I want to connect that into the best security service edge. You can totally do that, and you can integrate them. This will probably be preferred by large enterprises, typically, where they have separate security teams and separate networking teams. Those two groups don't always jive and get along. Those two groups also a lot of times have separate budgets, so they don't have to spend the same pool of money. So this is important because they may want to go with two different solutions, and that's totally fine. And then you can get the potential best of breed. So let me state this point, that there is not a single vendor on the market that is the best at all five of these technologies. So everyone has a strength and weakness in one of these areas, including VMware, and I readily admit that. So this might be ideal for some customers where they want to have best of breed SSE, best of breed SD-WAN, and they may choose two different vendors. So what about integration? The cons of this are the integration limitations. You're going to create extra hops because maybe I'm going from my SD-WAN edge to an SD-WAN POP, then I'm hopping over to an SSE POP from a different vendor. That SSE vendor might have limitations on the amount of traffic they're going to allow from that SD-WAN POP. So these are all things you need to consider, and they could be cons to the whole thing. But how does VMware overlay on this, right? So, like I said, there's those two ways to consume SASE: converged, integrated. We support both. Uh, I told you I was a customer for 13 years. I got to know VMware from the infrastructure side, deploying vSphere and our VDI platform, which we called View at the time. And one thing that I always loved about VMware, and it's part of why I joined the company and I've stayed here for so long, is VMware's always tried to be that neutral vendor, that neutral party. We want to enable choice, enable maximum flexibility for our customers. You can do that on our infrastructure stuff. You can switch from storage vendors overnight with no problems. We make it seamless with no downtime. That's something we've done for a long time. That's a perfect example of the choice that VMware enables. And we want to do that on the SASE front too. So you can come to us, you can consume a single vendor SASE solution from us, or like I said, going into those pros and cons, we offer you choice from an SSE integration standpoint. And we are working hard. I can tell you because I work in the product management team. We are working hard to deliver automated integrations with those SSE vendors, not just a standard manual IPsec tunnel that you would set up. So um, what this one of my last myths here. So all SASE solutions are created equal, right? Well, like I said, different vendors have varying degrees of SASE solutions. There's not a single vendor that's the best at all of them. But it makes you wonder, right? It's like, well, if not every vendor is the best at all, these core 5 technologies, then what differentiates a SASE solution? How do I put all these different vendor SASE solutions? How do I weigh them out? Well, would the question then is what differentiates a SASE offering? And it goes back to what SASE really is, which it's an architectural framework, right? And then so if that's the goal, and this is something Ahmed Al Sharif on my team really drove home with me and taught me, is that it's all about the architecture. And it's the simplicity and the flexibility that architecture offers. It's how all these different services integrate and how you can architect them to deliver a secure, optimized experience like I keep talking about. So VMware SASE, we integrate technologies across IT, networking, and security. But again, if you think about where VMware comes from as a vendor, we're not in the same bucket as other vendors out there. So you have your Cisco's of the world who come mainly from that networking background. You have Palo Alto, Zscaler. These vendors are thinking more, Fortinet, more from a security mindset. So they're all coming at it from their strengths. The security vendors are known for firewalls, Cisco known for networking, and they try to meet in the middle. And the whole solution gets designed around their core business. VMware's core business, again, is hybrid cloud, which is really what SASE is about. It's about stitching together all these varying clouds. So that's where I think, will really rise to the top. It's the differentiating we offer from, just that multi-vendor strategy, and we enable that choice. But it's also, even if you think about who's the best at infrastructure, as services get distributed to the edge, who owns most of those edge workloads? VMware does. So this is something I believe we can really play to. We have a broad ecosystem of partners. You can come back and look at this slide, but in various areas of multi-cloud and unified communications, which is important when you think about all the remote work people are doing and the remote meetings they're having. Private 5G, which is coming more into play, and then edge, which I talked about a little bit. But we've been recognized as a leader in fact, since the Gartner MQ was around our SD-WAN, well, I should say for SD-WAN, we have dominated that for like 5 years now, and we plan to in the future. Very important to keep understanding. We have a myriad of customers who have both deployed and used our solutions successfully and are very happy. Plus, our solution's widely deployed. So one of the best things about our SD-WAN, one thing that really differentiates it, and remember I talked about it operationalizing those security services, is we have this unique cloud gateway architecture. So we've always started off as cloud first with our SD-WAN solution. The other SD-WAN vendors aren't like that. We have thousands of cloud gateways deployed around the world, hundreds of POPs. This is incredibly important for minimizing latency and jitter at the last mile, which can be a common problem. It also just simplifies management. And this is all built in. It's just in the license. If you were trying to do this with a vendor that doesn't have it, you would have to think about where you'd place these gateways. So this is a big differentiator for us. So why VMware SASE? Just to summarize and end, is we really deliver that differentiated value to distributed enterprises. We do that well. It gets back to our choice. It gets back to the performance we offer, the cloud platform, and how this is all going to play in the future as applications continue to evolve, as the edge becomes a bigger and bigger thing for customers. And it really comes down to who can deliver that the best, most secure experience for their users, and be able to shift in the future as applications evolve. That I believe is VMware. So if you'd like to learn more, visit our website. You can have the link here. You can get in contact with someone. Just fill out one of the forms you'll find there. There are lots of good resources as well. And then something I love to promote, because I like to stay active on these social platforms, especially LinkedIn. We have a great LinkedIn page. You can see a lot of the stuff my team creates, as well as others in our group. We have a great YouTube channel. My team makes a lot of good technical YouTube videos on how to use our stuff. And we have Facebook, Twitter, and all that. And then last, I got to do a plug for myself, especially since we're doing LinkedIn Live. Connect with me. Again, please connect with me. I love to meet folks. Send me a message. I would love your feedback, positive or negative, on the session, if you found it helpful, and I would love to stay in touch with you just in general. So please reach out to me. And with that, thank you so much. I had so much fun preparing for this and doing this today, and I hope everyone got value from this today. Thank you.